Welcome to another edition of the Giants Huddle podcast, brought to you by Citizens, the official bank of the New York Football Giants. I am John Schmeelk. Thank you for being with us today, everybody. We welcome in I think, third or fourth time guest. You might know him from NFL Network, but if you're a little bit older like me, you'll know him as Super Bowl champion and Pro Football Hall of Famer, Kurt Warner. Kurt, it's good to see you, man. Thanks for being with us again. And once a Giant, always a Giant.
Got it. Good to see you as well.
All right, Kurt, let's get into it. The Giants decided to trade up into the first round to draft Jaxson Dart. Before we get into Jaxson specifically, I got to admit, I've referenced our conversation last year before the draft, probably more than any other one we've had here on our Giants Huddle podcast. And the lesson that I learned from you last year is we were talking about Jaden Daniels. And I said to you, Kurt, he just doesn't throw over the middle a ton. And you said to me, John, don't knock a quarterback if you don't know if his quarterback was asking him to do that. He might have been not have been asked to do that. And I just thought that was a really valuable lesson. I thought I want to kind of give that back to you and say thank you, because I think we all learned watching Jaden Daniels this year. He can do that pretty darn well.
Yeah. Yeah, no, he was phenomenal this year. And again, it's one of the hardest things about trying to evaluate these guys from college, because offenses are so different. And what these quarterbacks are asked to do is so different. So it's why, to me, I'm not a huge draft guy because I do believe so much of it is just projection. We don't know who's going to get better. We don't know what a player is capable of. We could go a couple years ago to C.J. Stroud. I thought he was better as a rookie in Houston than I ever saw him at Ohio State. Right. Not that he wasn't good at Ohio State, but they were asking him to play a different way, and I didn't know if he could play that way. And in Houston, I got to see that in the first year, and he was phenomenal his first year. And so that's the hard thing about evaluating these guys, especially when you're just watching tape, right? You don't have a chance to really sit in a room and decipher what they know and what they see and what their process is. You're basically going off of what the coach lays out there. Okay, this is our offense. Now you have to try to determine, okay, does he have enough, or have I seen enough to project him forward to the NFL to be a great player? And it's really, really hard with a lot of these guys. And so, so again, it's just kind of a word of caution for everybody as you're trying to evaluate this position. You don't really know until you know, and it's why it's such an inexact science.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and then we'll get to Jaxson in a second. I think this is why the Giants take the process that they go through with the quarterbacks from January to April so seriously. I had a long conversation with Joe Shane about this a couple weeks ago, and he just said, look, you can watch the tape, but you don't really know how they progress, their decision-making, how they're seeing the field until you actually talk to their coaches and find out what they're being taught, getting them in front of a monitor and a whiteboard and going through plays with them to seeing how they think about things. And if you don't have that for someone like me, especially, who's never played the position, even someone like you who done this for a living at the highest level, it's just going to be hard to know how these guys process the game, which, Kurt, let's be honest, that really is in a lot of ways the most important. You can have the best arm in the world. If you can't process the game, it really isn't going to matter, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt. To me, it's the most important thing, without a doubt, without question. And again, it's even hard when you get them in a room. Like, I've been around a lot of guys that you can put them on a board and they can answer every question. But the next process or part of it becomes, can you process all that information in 4 seconds and do the right thing? And so there's even layers to that where it's nice to hear and it's nice to know. And, I've even been around other guys that, I can watch them on tape, and then I get them and talk to them about that play after the fact. And I know that they're just coaching me up off of the tape that they watched. I know it wasn't what they did because I've watched their eyes. I see their body, but it's easy to do. So you get a quarterback in a room and, you take them back to a certain play. They've already seen that play 4 or 5 times. And so they can go and, oh, well, here's what I was thinking, and they can come up with an answer that sounds really, really good, which may not actually be what happened in the moment. It's just, now I know. So now I'm going to tell you what I know. And so, again, there's so many layers to this that you try to peel back as many layers as you possibly can. But what we know is none of it really matters. You can think but you don't know until they do it, and they do it at this level, and they do it consistently at the NFL level. And, that's the beauty of it, and that's the struggle of it and the frustration of it, that we can say whatever we want and we can blame evaluators at the end of the day, or Bottom line is we don't know until we know. We don't know until they're between the lines at this speed with the complexity of what they're seeing, and they can actually, do the things they need to do to be successful. But that's what makes this whole process fun. As we
Yeah.
project forward, and we hope that what all the things that the Giants did will equal great success on the football field.
Okay, so now let's get into Dart specifically. And to your point, you have to talk about the environment he was in college. Lane Kiffin, great offensive coach, right? In the college, he sets things up for the quarterback really nicely. And by the way, folks, go to Kurt's Quarterback Confidential YouTube page. He did a great breakdown of Jackson about a month ago, I think. It's must watch. Go check it out. It's fantastic. And you talk about how so many of these plays, and you see it on tape. They spam the same concept like 7 to 10 times every game, right? It's either
Right.
they run that play where the flag runs underneath the go route outside. They had the
Yeah.
deep over and they try to get the safety out. But a lot of it is the quarterback reading one player, right? And you highlight that in your breakdown. A
Hmm.
lot of times it's the safety or the corner. Are you going to the flat? Are you going over him into the flag? Or is the
Yeah.
safety, who is he going to on a specific play? What they're asking him to do at Ole Miss, sorry for the long question. How do you think
No.
that might translate to what he's going to be asked to do in the NFL? And what were you able to see from the
Yeah.
environment he was in at Ole Miss?
Well, some of the things, they did a lot of RPOs. So when you go and watch the tape, there's a lot of hitches thrown and that sort of stuff, which is fine. NFL teams are running that to a degree. So be it. I mean, not that I hate that stuff, but again, you kind of expect every quarterback to be able to do that sort of stuff. So you got to eliminate that part of it. And then you got to try to decipher from the rest of it. The things that I really liked is that there were pro concepts within their offense. There were a number of what I call chunk or second level throws, which to me is always the biggest difference maker at the NFL level is can you read and make those second level throws consistently? Those 15 to 35-yard throws that change the complexion of games or series or field position. Got to be able to make those at a healthy clip for me to be a really special player at the NFL level. They asked him to do that. I thought he was one of the better intermediate throwers in this draft. I really like that about him. He's got a little bit of athleticism to him. And when I say a little bit, obviously way more than I ever had. But when I say a little bit, I mean not a guy that can live in the athletic world. We have some guys that major more in the athletic world at the NFL level. He's not that kind of guy, but he gives you enough athleticism that and I think about Brian Daboll and I think about what he did with Josh Allen, especially like in the red zone, the RPOs or the quarterback run game, those kinds of things that I believe he gives you enough there that he gives you a nice little change up with what Coach Daboll likes to do, what he did with Daniel Jones. That you don't major in that, but that can be an element of your offense. So there were things that I definitely liked about Jaxson Dart. There were things that easy for me to see why the Giants thought he was the number 2 quarterback and went up and got him. But still questions. When he's asked to carry a team playing quarterback, and again, that's a throw out the RPOs, throw out the athletic part of it. When you got to play quarterback and you got to play in the pocket and you've got to deliver and you've got to make throw after throw, as you saw in the breakdown. And again, when I do my breakdowns, it's tough because I don't get to do a number of breakdowns on each of these guys. Top guys, I did a couple, and everybody else, I did one. So when I go back and look at the tape, I never take their best game, and I never take their worst game because it's like, okay, we're all going to have great games at times. We're all going to have, stinkers at times. I want to know who they are consistently. So you try to find a game that showcases kind of everything, including the questions you have at the next level. So in that game, when they were down to Florida in that game, and he was asked to make throw after throw after throw, he was a little careless with the football. And he was a little careless with his decision making in those moments. And so, again, it's to me just, hey, this is what I saw. This is something I'm watching moving forward. Is in those moments when you're asked to carry the team with your right arm, can you make those throws consistently? We go back to Jaden Daniels. That to me was what made him so special is that in the biggest moments, he played exactly the same way he played the other 3 quarters. And that's what separated him last year. And that's what I want to see with the Jaxson Dart that wasn't necessarily asked to do that, a lot, where it's just play drop back quarterback, play within the scheme and make throw after throw after throw to bring us back in a football game.
All right, I want to dig into a bunch of stuff you talked about there, Curbs. I thought it was great. I know one of the things you look at right away is can you play on time and on schedule? That's one of the big important things for you as a quarterback. In that regard, did you see that consistently from Jaxson, being on time, getting where you're supposed to go with the ball at the right time with the right pace and all that stuff?
Yeah, not too bad. But again, the one thing about their offense is I felt like, their offense was either really quick throws,
Yeah,
or those second level throws. And so the reason I say that is because quick throws just come out as soon as they can come out. The timing element is not, there is a timing element, but it's more catch and shoot. And then the deeper throws, there's not as much of a timing element either because, there's not this is going to be a 12-yard route and you've got to hit him on the turn and you got to hit him between those things can play out a little bit differently depending on the scenario. And so they didn't have a great deal of those kind of 15 and under type throws, at least the ones that I saw, that are really timing oriented type throws where get back, you got to see it, ball's got to come out.
Yeah, like slants, right? Like slants.
Slants, curls, quick in routes, things like that. Pop routes where it's 6-7 yards, boom, boom, you read it, pop, balls out of your hands. There wasn't quite as many of those kind of quick read, decision-making, ball out type concepts that I pulled from the tape. And so a little bit harder to tell in that world. But again, a lot of it's going to depend on what kind of world the Giants have to live in and, and where they have to play from that perspective. But I just didn't see a whole bunch of those, to be able to kind of glean, okay, he's really good at these timing, quick hitches, ball out of his hands, seeing it, getting it into the tight windows. Didn't see that quite as much from Jaxson Dart.
No, I'm with you, but to your point, we saw a ton of the intermediate stuff. And what jumped out to me watching, and you brought up on the tape too, his ability to put touch on the ball and get it over the linebacker level in front of the safety level, I just thought was really good because a lot of times, you don't want to get it too high. And I think we saw it, and it was the Georgia game, I think, where he tried to do that on an in cut. He got a little bit too high and it went over the receiver's head to a safety. But for the most part, his ability to layer the balls in between defenders, I thought was pretty consistent throughout his tape.
Yeah, I mean, I'm big on not having to throw the ball hard. I know we fall in love with the physical talent and how far and hard a guy can throw it. I always use the term firm but soft. And I've got a son who plays college football as a quarterback, and he's like, Dad, that's not physics. You can't do that. You can't be firm. And I've said, I'll show you what that looks like. And what that is it's the ability to have the pace on the football where it doesn't die and it doesn't hang on you, but it gets from point A to point B. But also the ability to put touch on it. So you can get the ball up and down and you can layer it over the linebackers and before the safeties like you're talking about, but still have good pace on the football. And you're right. I think Jaxson does that really, really well, that he doesn't ever overthrow it. You don't ever feel like he's throwing the ball hard. It's easy throws from him, but the ball, it gets there. It's got the right pace on it and makes it easy to catch for his guys on the second level. So I always think that that's really, really important. I mean, again, I'm going to go back to Jaden Daniels just because you brought him up. I think that's the one thing that jumped off the tape last year. I don't think I ever saw Jaden Daniels throw the ball hard. Like, I don't even know how strong his arm is. Like, I know, again, strong, I don't look at strong as the ability to throw it really far because everybody can throw it far enough. It's, do you throw these lasers? I didn't see him have to throw those kind of balls. Everything had a nice touch on it, was easy to catch, a great piece on the football, always got there. And those are the kind of throwers that I think make it easier for everybody around them. Those were the kind of things that I saw from Jaxson Dart in college.
Huddle up, get in here. If you're lined up here, you gotta go over the middle with it to score.
Right. How do we make that happen?
I don't know, but Citizens does. Make sense of your money with Citizens, official bank of Eli Manning.
The Giants Huddle podcast is brought to you by Citizens, the official bank of the Giants. From game day celebrations to your everyday financial needs, Big Blue fans can get the most out of every moment with Citizens. Learn more at citizensbank.com/Giants. Yeah, and I think at times we saw him go through those full field progressions from one side of the field to the other. And I think you highlighted one where he went through a shallow cross, a guy in the flat, and then he hit the deep over the top. But again, I think that's one of those deals where you have to really look for those, right? And you can find them, but it's just not a very common thing that they were asking him to do in that offense where so much he was programmed.
I'll say this too. I'm not a big, you say full field. And so there's lots of different ways to look at that. Mm-hmm. There's the pure progression type stuff, which a lot of teams run, which is, start to your right, read one, read two, come back to the middle, then work all the way to the left. I'm not a big fan of those kind of plays. And so when I think of full field reads, what I think of is being able to take the snap, read the coverage, and then decipher, am I going right or am I going left? Am I reading the concept to the right or am I reading the concept to the left? And then simplifying it from there, as you were mentioning, hey, I'm reading the flat defender. This is a high-low on the flat defender. So that's how I like to play the game. So I don't even like the pure progression where it's like go from here to here to here to here. Now, it's nice to be able to see a quarterback process information. Okay, one's not here, two's not here. I'd like to see a guy get to three. Once you get beyond three, that's not realistic football anyways. The number of quarterbacks that actually get to 4 and 5 in any progression, if there is a 4 and 5, is slim to none. But I like to see guys in a timely fashion get to 3 or look at 1 and 2 and get to their check down. But a lot of times in college, you've got to see this full field, pure progression type read, which I'm not a huge fan of. So I don't like to get too hung up with, hey, we didn't see a lot of that. Hey, when I played the game, I tried to simplify it as quickly as possible to, hey, it's this guy. High, low, boom, ball's out of my hands. I don't need to do all of this and spend all this time. But a lot of that comes from pre-snap processing, knowing where to go, and then being able to play on time.
Okay, so let me follow up then. I imagine then it's important to be able to quickly identify coverages, right? Because that'll tell you where you want to go with the ball and where you want to target, or identifying a blitz. And I know you featured one play there where twice, I think, where a DB blitzes, a linebacker blitzes, he replaces them, gets it right to the ball right to the guy who was where the guy was blitzing from. So do you feel like from watching him that he has a pretty good feel for identifying not just blitzes, but also coverages, so he is looking at the right places to deliver the ball?
Again, such a hard thing to know because, again, in college football with pure progression stuff, your eyes can end up in the right place for a particular read, but it may have been dictated ahead of time. Like, hey, you're starting over here no matter what. The hot throws. I always am looking for that from every quarterback. I want to see they bring pressure. What do you do? What's your answer? And he did answer it well a couple times in that tape. Again, did he see it? Was that a built-in? Was that his first read where he was going anyway? So it was an easy process for him, which is fine. Again, sometimes it's easy. I got no problem with that. But it doesn't always tell you what did he identify? How much did he see on the snap? And how much did he have to answer in his mind? But the times that I saw him do it, he didn't panic. He made the right play. He got a positive play against pressure. All of those things are good within the structure that I saw him play.
And then you talked about consistency of reads, right? Does a quarterback consistently make the right decision? And I think with passes down the field specifically with him, and I think we saw this throughout the year, he loves throwing it deep. He's very willing to be a vertical passer. But I think, and you saw it a couple of times in that Florida game, you see it a couple of times in other games too, where sometimes he will throw the ball into a little bit of a team meeting, which is not ideal for a quarterback. For you, does that come down to him predetermining, you think, where he wants to go with the football? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think at times it can, because that's what, again, you like to see is that, all of us as quarterbacks will make a bad decision. We'll throw it up and a guy comes over here and now it's 2-on-1 or we read it wrong, whatever. That always happens. What you're trying to look for is consistency when you're seeing the same play over and over again. Like, okay, how often is he reading this right? Are his eyes on the safety to see if the safety holds on the corner so we can throw the post over the top and some of those things. And then especially in critical moments. And that was kind of what I was pointing out in that game. And again, we could have probably pulled up another game where he was better in the critical moments, but that was a game they were down. He was forced to have to throw to bring them back. And I thought he made, a number of just really questionable, I couldn't quite figure out why are you throwing this one up when the safety did absolutely nothing on the snap and he's just standing back there. or the late interception where he just kind of throws it down the sideline where there's only a defender there. There's no, so yeah, again, I thought he did a good job in the tape that I watched of making those throws. But I want to know in the most critical moments, you're going to make the best decisions that you make throughout the course of the game in those moments. And I didn't necessarily see it in the game that I broke down, in one of those games that was a tighter game or when they were down late. So it's just, again, when I tweeted not too long ago, just, this idea in college, what's so hard too is there's a lack of parity in college.
Yeah.
And so when you play for Ole Miss, 8 games out of 12, you're going to be the better football team across the board.
Yeah, maybe 10.
The quarterback, maybe even more, right? And so the quarterback doesn't have to be great. Yes, you have to make plays, and yes, you have to, but the margin of error is going to be greater because your guys are better than their guys are. And so, when you get into those critical, tight games and you're not used to that, I want to know who you are. I want to know how you play. I want to know, do you give your team a chance more times than not in those kind of moments? Because you're usually not going to have as many of those, when you're the best teams in in college football. Whereas in the NFL, most games are going to come down to one score, a tight game late, and the quarterback's going to have to play well. You just don't know in college football. And so, again, you can always say, well, you took this tape and maybe that skewed a little bit, and it might be. But again, you got to try to pull as many different scenarios into one breakdown of a tape as you possibly can, because a lot of times they're not playing that way. And Jaxson Dart doesn't have to make every throw because they're up by 2 touchdowns, or he can take an extra tick to throw the football because his guy's open by, 10 yards, as opposed to a tight throw that you got to make at the NFL level. And so you're just trying to glean as much possible from those situations. And really, again, project forward some questions. Not that they don't have the answers to those questions, not that they're not, better than what they showed on tape, but just the questions that I have going in with all of these guys, because I don't think any of them are finished product. Not even Cam Ward, who was the number 1 overall pick. I think they all have things to work on, and they have to get better at if they want to be great at the next level. So part of my breakdown, just to point out what those questions are for me and the things that I'm going to be watching for when they get under center at the NFL level.
What do you think of his traits? Just basic quarterback, one-on-one, arm strength, athleticism, pocket movement, things like that.
Good enough. Because again, I'm not a traits guy, and maybe it's because I didn't have those traits and was able to be really successful. I mean, you guys know Eli Manning didn't have those traits.
Nope.
Was able to be really successful. There's there's a lot of guys, and I know the trend is moving towards athleticism. I get that. But I still believe when you watch in critical moments of games, you have to be able to play from inside the pocket. And it's not about traits. It's about the mental ability to make decisions, get the ball to the right guy, and then having good enough traits to make the throws that you're going to be asked to make, or to make, a 5-yard run when you have to make a 5-yard run. And Jaxson Dart, to me, has all of, the skills to be good enough. He's got good enough arm strength. He's got good enough mobility. He's got all of that stuff, to me, is good enough to be a really good quarterback in the National Football League. So it's not anything that I'm concerned about, from a skill set standpoint.
You mentioned his mobility. The one thing I was kind of impressed by, Kurt, and we see some college quarterbacks, when they get pressure, they'll roll out, they'll run backwards. Jaxson Dart tends to step up and through the pressure, which I really like. Now, a lot of times he just runs off of that, which, by the way, if you can get 10, 12 yards on the run, that's great. But right. I thought his pocket presence in that way was actually pretty good for a young player.
Yeah, I mean, I think he does a nice job. He's willing to run. And a lot of people have made the comparison to a Jalen Hurts. And I actually like that comparison. That Jalen isn't off the charts, skill set wise, whether that's athletically or speed or arm strength. But he's good in all of those areas. He's got enough in all of those areas. And, when he runs, very seldom is it going to be a 40-yard run, but he does a great job of picking up 8 to 10 yards. He's got a nice feel when the pocket opens up, and a big body to be able to run through somebody if he needs to, score down in the red zone and do those things. And I think Jaxson Dart is very similar to that. Maybe not quite as good an athlete as Jalen, but I think in the same vein, of what he brings to the table. And so I think when you watch Jalen play, I look at this and say, I think Jaxson Dart could be a very similar type player within that offense to what Jalen does. Jalen's a big time thrower in big time moments and those things, and I want to see that from Jaxson. But just skill set wise, I think that's a pretty accurate comparison when we're just talking about the physical skills of Jaxson to somebody that's playing in the NFL.
All right, Kurt, finally, now let's talk about him in the Giants building. You were a young quarterback that had to come in and earn his way. Nothing was given to you. You weren't a first-round pick. So what does this developmental process now look like for Jaxson? Now that he gets in the building, he's in meetings with Mike Kafka, who's a former NFL quarterback. He's done it. Shea Tierney, the quarterback's coach. Brian Dable, who knows how to develop a quarterback. Yeah. What does he need to focus on? What does he need to do in the spring and the summer when he gets reps, and then when the season gets here, or maybe he's not getting the reps, to continue to develop as a quarterback to earn his way onto the field?
I mean, I think it's understanding the process that he has to go through in those 4 to 5 seconds, when he gets the ball in his hands. Is that, again, with this whole class, I don't believe any of them are athletic enough to live in that world and be really successful in the NFL. They are going to have to play more traditional pocket quarterback, in my opinion, to be really good quarterbacks in the NFL. And so for Jaxson, that to me is the step. Is I've got to learn, I've got to process, I've got to talk to as many people as possible. I've got to come up with my plan on how to play on schedule, on time, within the structure of the offense, because that's where I'm going to be ultra successful. I don't think it's going to be in the other areas where, and we'll use Russell Wilson since he's in New York. When he was playing in the early stages in Seattle, he didn't do all of the stuff I'm talking about. He was a guy that played athletically. Like he can make, of course, a throw on time. And if number one's open, he can make that throw. But he lived very much in the world of, hey, we got a good defense and a good run game, and I'm a complementary piece. And so my goal is to make 6 or 7 or 8 plays a game, run around, make a throw down the field, run around and make a run. And he was good enough to play and live in that world in the early stages of his career. Ben Roethlisberger, another guy that was able to do that early on, had the benefit of, again, good run game, good defense. So you only had to make so many plays a game of those special plays, and it gave your team a chance to win. I just don't think Jaxson is quite that guy. So I do believe he's going to have to play traditional football. He's going to have to, up his game in terms of processing, getting the ball out, or even just show us. Again, I don't want to say up his game because we talked about that earlier. Maybe it's in there and we just didn't see it. And so, but he's going to have to play more in that vein. So to me, that's the process. Learning the offense, understanding the nuance, understanding the reads, knowing where to get his eyes, seeing the coverages and understanding what his keys are so he can play on time and get the ball out of his hands, and then allow the athleticism to be a complementary piece, to those other things.
And just to follow up, I think it's pretty easy to do that in the spring and the summer, right? Just in terms of, because you have the reps to do it, right? You're running in your offense, you're getting practices, you're going to get into some games in the preseason to show it on the field. What is it like, Kurt, for a quarterback when you get to the regular season, right? And Russell's getting all of the first team snaps in practice. Maybe Jackson's running the scout team. Maybe he could do some walkthrough with some of the practice squad guys in the Giants offense after practice. How does he continue to learn to do the things you're talking about when maybe you're not getting those full speed reps against defenses like you are in the spring and the summer?
And it can vary by team, so a lot of it depends on how much does a team game plan during the season. So when you get into preseason games, you've got your base offense, you've been running your base offense for 3 or 4 weeks, and it's, normal, basic, kind of easy concept plays. And then you get into the season and you can't always run those plays every week. Oh, this team does this. This play is not as good. We're going to have to add another play. We're going to have to do this. And our game plan starts to change throughout the season. And so that's part of that process, is being able to pick up the nuances and the different defenses that you're going to see. And what are the keys against those defenses? And, okay, we're putting in a new play. What's different about this play than the base play that we're running? And so, in preseason, again, it's base plays offensively a lot of times for you. It's base defenses a lot of times for the teams that you're playing. Everything ramps up and ratchets up in regular season because now they're preparing for you. They've watched your tape. Oh, these are their base plays. We're going to run defenses to take away the base plays. So now you've got to put in secondary or complementary plays. And so that's where the volume starts to add up. You've got 4 or 5 days to do all of this. You got to get comfortable with the defenses you're seeing. And so that's where it gets harder in the regular season, especially if you don't have a lot of reps. You don't get a lot of reps. And so for me, when I wasn't the starter, I would try to take every scout team rep that I could. And I would always try to see where I could take a play from another team's offense and somehow place it into our offensive playbook and go, okay, this play is very similar to that play. Maybe not exact, but very similar. I'm going to go back and read this the way I would read that play that's in our game plan this week. So I'm going to try to get a mental rep and a physical rep on that play, even though I'm running the scout team. And so that to me was how I like to do it is, I had a really good vision for how plays were connected and what I was looking at with different coverages. And so I was always trying to do that. So although not completely apples to apples, it was trying to get those mental reps. So when I did get my opportunity, I had somewhat seen or gone through the process besides just standing behind the huddle and trying to mentally walk myself through, that mental rep without physically seeing it and doing it, because I wasn't getting those reps.
If you want to know how to manage 2 minutes of crunch time football, I'm your man. But if you're wondering about a long-term financial plan, you should talk to Citizens. Hey, I can also talk lawn care.
I'd like to learn about a mowing routine.
Yes, I knew I could help. Make sense of your money with Citizens.
Great answer. And Kurt, final question, and I don't mean to bring back a bad memory, but you were on the other side of this when the Giants drafted Eli Manning, right? You were here. You were over 500 as a starter. You were 5-4, right? The team was 5-4. They were playing good football, but the Giants decided to go with Eli midseason. What does this look like in that quarterback room for a veteran quarterback like Russell Wilson, who I'm sure still thinks he has a lot of good football left in him? He played pretty well for the Steelers last year until he played some really tough teams at the end of the year, and they lost a few games in a row. What happens? What are you going to do? What is this going to be like for him, and how does he work with the young guy in this situation? And then how does this decision get made by Brian Daboll when he's not seeing Jaxson Dart having a lot of, reps and figuring out when he actually is ready? Just kind of take me inside of that from someone that lived it a little bit.
Yeah, I actually know Russell, quite a bit, and actually am really close with Jameis as well. And I think both those guys will be great for Jaxson, in terms of their willingness to help him, however they can help him. Now, those two guys are two different kinds of quarterbacks. Again, Russell, less of the more traditional drop back, read, play on time type quarterback. But there's things that he's really good at seeing and throwing and the way he throws things. So I think he can really help Jaxson with that stuff. I think Jameis is really good mentally at processing information and reading coverages and getting to the right guy. And so I think combination wise, they could be, a great combination for Jaxson to help him with the two facets of his game. In terms of Coach Daboll, and just like when I was there, I think it becomes a variety of different things that you're looking at in making the decisions on playing. So when I went to New York, the team was 4-12 the year before. Yep. New coach. There wasn't, a lot of excitement about the team and what we could be because of everything that had transpired. And so, and without a doubt, I was the better player at that time too. But I had been there and I had led. And so when I got inserted, into the offense there, it wasn't anything like offenses that I ran, and it didn't necessarily play to my strengths. But my job was to get the guys to believe in the possibilities and to find ways to win because we weren't a great football team. And so we were able to do that. We started 5-2, and as you said, we were 5-4. But what I think came to pass after those 9 games was there was a couple things. That first, we weren't a great football team. Even though we were a playoff team at the time, I think everybody that involved realized we were manufacturing wins. We weren't a great football team, that was going to go out and really have a chance to win a championship. And I know, Giants have been there before. You get in as a wild card and you get hot, and it can happen. But I think that was the first part to what they saw was, okay, we're not a great football team. And so even if we keep kind of sitting around 500, a little bit better than 500, even sneak into the playoffs, is that worth, not developing our young quarterback? So in 2 or 3 years, because we feel like we've got some pieces in 2 or 3 years, when we feel like we're ready, will he be ready? And so I think that was the first part of the process. And I think part of a process that could happen, with the Giants this year is you've got your veteran that's not your future. And you may get to a point where you're kind of muddling around, winning some games. Does it become more advantageous to go to the young guy? And then I think the second part of the equation was I wasn't able to be who I was in that offense. And I think they understood that as well. And so it was a struggle for me to do the things that I wanted to do and the things that I was accustomed to doing. And so, they didn't want to do those sorts of things. And there's a couple examples from that season if you got the time.
Yeah, of course.
But so we played against Baltimore, and this was after, Eli had taken over and, one of his first couple games, and he really struggled in the game.
Oh, he got obliterated. Yeah. I remember that game.
It was a rough game for him. Yeah. And so they put me in late in the second half, in like 3 series, we threw for 160 yards and we put up 2 touchdowns, and because they were playing my brand of football, but that's not how they wanted to play. So you could see the glimpse of that. My last game that I started was in Arizona with the Giants, and we started in the no huddle, and we drove down and scored 2 touchdowns right off the bat in the no huddle. We're up like 14-0 or 14-7 in that game. And then we got out of the no huddle and we went back to doing what we do, and we lost 17-14 in that game. And so that was a good indication for me that I know I can still play, but they don't want me to play the way that I play my best. And so I was never able to put my best foot forward. We were not built to play to really my mindset and what I wanted to do. And, there was a number of fumbles that I had that year, because there were times that I'm trying to hold on to the ball and get guys open and make plays that I had made earlier in my career. We just weren't built that way. And so I think they ultimately saw that too. Not that Kurt's not the better quarterback, but we're just not going to play to Kurt's strength. We're not going to play that brand of football. And so having Kurt in there, it's been great. We won early on and we've got guys to believe, but he's not going to be able to elevate us, to this other level, because we're not going to let him. And we're not built that way. So all of those things, I think, played into maybe it's best to just make the move now and take our lumps, the last 7 games of the season, let Eli take his lumps. Let's figure out who we're going to be with Eli as our quarterback so we can come back next year and kind of hit the ground running with knowing who our quarterback is, knowing how we want to play, and being able to put the pieces around them to be successful. And ultimately, obviously, it worked out great for Eli and the Giants and what they did. And so,
and for you, by the way, you ended up going to the Super Bowl in Arizona.
Yeah, no. And yeah, I mean, I was able to do enough to parlay that into another opportunity for sure. But I say all that to go, the Giants are going to have to figure out who they are throughout this season and what they're capable of, and what they're capable of with Russell Wilson as their quarterback playing the way he does. Does it fit their skill set? And he's a good deep ball thrower, right? He's a good off-schedule thrower. Do they have the pieces there to do that sort of stuff, or do they have to be more of a, 10-yard, 15-yard pass offense that maybe plays to Jameis or even Jaxson maybe a little bit better than Russell? And so those are the questions that I think will have to be answered, barring the fact that they don't come out of the blocks and win 7 straight and look like world beaters. If they're kind of, middling, through everything, I think that's when you have to start asking those different questions. And what's the best for the future? What's the best for our system? What's the best with the pieces we have? What gives us the best opportunity? And again, I love Coach Daboll, and I think he does a great job. And but a lot of people are talking, Are they a little bit more on the hot seat? Do they need to win? How much do they need to win? Do they get some extra time now that they have a young quarterback to be able to play this out the way that they want to? Or do they have to force the vets a little bit more because they have to win right now? So I think those are factors as well. But I think at the end of the day, it really comes down to, what do we see our future? And, how do I feel like we're built now? What's the best way for us to have success? And then possibly get our young quarterback ready if we think, that time is coming sooner rather than later.
So in conclusion, having any sort of discussion now about when the best time is to slide Dart in is pretty useless until you see how the season goes, right? And how Russell plays, except for maybe putting him in there right away, which I don't think anyone is considering that at all. Yeah. Joe Shane said in his first press conference after the draft, Russell's our starter. I think that's the right way. But basically, until you see how this plays out, knowing when the right time is pretty impossible, huh?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, seeing who the quarterback is and where he's at the time. I mean, because again, even with the Giants that year, Eli wasn't ready to be the starter yet. He wasn't ready. But, again, with all the other things that were going on, they said, yeah, we know he's not ready. But we're hoping that through these 7 games, he can get ready. We can throw enough at him and he can see enough and he can handle enough that he'll be ready, when the season. So I think all those things are factors. But I've always believed that the easiest way to always go is to start the veteran. It's so much easier to start the vet and go to the young guy than it is with any other scenario, starting the young guy and then having to go to the vet and then trying to come back to the young guy, or just struggling through things early with the young guy. It's always easier to go with the vet. And if things aren't working or working the way you want them to, or you feel that the young guy, is ready to some degree, then it's easy to just look for an opportunity. Oh, it's the bye week. Oh, we've lost a couple games. Then it's easy to find that transition point to the young guy. And so I think the Giants are in a great position from that standpoint, that they've got 2 guys that have started a lot of football in the NFL. They don't have to force this issue and put extra undue pressure on Jaxson Dart. They can let it play out. And then when the pressure's at its least, that can be the time that they insert him, whether that's halfway through the year, whether that's the end of the year, whether that's next year, where we've alleviated some of that, hey, come in and be the savior for this team, when there's a lot of parts that need to be fixed.
Yeah, maybe slide him in when you have the Raiders as the upcoming opponent and not the Eagles, something like that. That would be helpful too.
Of course, yes.
Kurt,
yes.
You are the absolute best, man. You're great. Tell the folks, obviously you can find them on NFL Network, Quarterback Confidential. Tell them about your YouTube page, everything you're doing that you want the fans to know about, Kurt.
Yeah, I'm all over doing all kinds of different things. I'm a football junkie. So yeah, QBconfidential.com is my teaching website. I've created a teaching website for quarterbacks and coaches and fans to really get inside the quarterback position and learn in a whole different way. So that's that website. I've got QB Confidential, which is my YouTube page, which I'm always doing different breakdowns on different things. Quarterbacks, as you were talking about, leading into the draft, certain plays, certain things that become trends in the NFL, which is kind of fun. As you said, I'll be on NFL Network doing the morning shows. I'll be doing broadcasts in different ways, some on TV, some on radio. So yeah, just kind of will be all over doing all kinds of different things, and always look forward to having interaction and talking ball.
Absolutely, Kurt. Enjoy the rest of your spring. This is our downtime. Enjoy it with the family. I will do the same, and look forward to the football season start up in a few months. Thank you very much for the time.
Awesome. Maybe we'll cross paths in the fall. Take care.
We thank Kurt Warner for joining us right here on the Giants Huddle podcast, brought to you by Citizens, the official bank of the Giants. Just invaluable insight from Kurt. He does his work. He knows his quarterbacks, and getting his insight on Jaxson Dart, I think, was really invaluable as we get him in the building here and see what he can do once his feet touch the grass here in East Rutherford, New Jersey. Thanks to Kurt for joining us. I'm John Schmeelk. We'll see you next time on the Giants Huddle podcast, brought to you by Citizens, the official bank of the Giants.